I'll look in the wrong spot. Okay,
So I interviewed my grandpa and he was in the Vietnam War. So I asked him, what were you doing during the period of the Vietnam War? And he was a radar operator. He was on two different ships during his tours. Those are the two ships. And I asked if he was drafted or enlisted. And he said he was drafted, but he didn't want to like get thrown somewhere, so he said no, I'm picking. So he enlisted so he wasn't forced into a branch. And he didn't have any plan. He only had a part-time job because he was just out of high school. So he thought it was a pretty good choice because it would set him up for most of his life. And he served from July 1st, 1967 to 1998. So 22 years in total, and there was 4 of those years in Vietnam. And I asked him, what did you think about the US involvement in Vietnam? And he said that he thought he was pretty naive then, and he thought it was his duty to defend his country. But he thought they were fighting communism because that's what they were told. And he agrees with their philosophy that there shouldn't be a communistic government in a very, very poor country because they don't really get a very good education system there. And if they do get people educated, then it like slowly benefits the country more and more, but it's not dominating it. And I asked how he felt about the draft, and he said he's glad he wasn't drafted, and he said when he was standing in to get his physical, 3 officers walked in and they just said, I need 5 Marines, and they pointed to 5 guys in the draft line and just said like you, and then they all had to go to the Marine line. And I asked, what did you understand your purpose was to be when you were serving? And he felt like it was to serve the country, and he had to do his job as a radar operator. So he just did his job and he was doing it till he got home. And I asked, how do you view your service in Vietnam? And he said, I think it was the wrong tactic. I think the war was managed poorly by politicians and that they were in way too in, and the way they were treated was horrible. And I learned they couldn't even come home in uniform because they had at first they could, but my great uncle Cliff, he was spit on and called a baby killer when he got home, from what he told me.
Mhm.
And when they were traveling, you had to wear their uniform, but then they changed that, and the message was sent out to the public because they kept like insulting all these service members. And I asked, did your view of war and US policy change as the war unfolded? And he said, yes, things were going badly. He said the French tried to take it over and the British tried to take it over, and it just wasn't our thing to do. And it wasn't going well for like a few years. And this is a long one, but I asked, did any personal experiences during the war signify or significantly shape your views? And he said, when he was over there, they did fire support like 2 miles offshore. So they fired rounds and he got in his bunk. So like he's in his bunk and here's the deck and he's like the first bunk under. And he was doing his rosary and he was trying to go to sleep and he fell asleep and a round shattered and it went through the deck and the deck was like this thick. So there was like shrapnel everywhere. And a piece hit his leg. And before he was gonna fall asleep, he was thinking about swapping sides of the bed. And if he did, it would have gone through his chest. So it really taught him to appreciate life. And he did a lot of soul searching after that. And he was the only one wounded in that, even though it went through like multiple parts of the ship. He was the only one wounded. And then the rest of that was they had a chaplain on board, and the next day they called him over, and he handed him the rosary, and they were like, "This was wrapped around a piece of shrapnel," and he still has it. He thinks that that really enforced his religious beliefs. And then another experience was they stopped in Korea on the way home, and it was like pouring rain when they stopped, and So they were walking down the street because they only had like limited liberty on where they could go. And there was a homeless woman on the street and she was trying to nurse a baby, but it was obviously dead. So it really just showed them that America is really lucky and we just don't think we are because there are so many countries poorer than us, especially after the Korean War, and they're suffering so much. And he said that image still stuck with him to the day. And I asked, have your views changed since the war ended? He said, yes, I don't think we were right. It was a last cause in the beginning. And his philosophy changed and he thinks we should rethink how we handle foreign affairs. And I asked him some of the McNamara questions. He didn't know any of the film ones, but I kind of asked one about how they analyzed the situation and whether they pursued the appropriate course. And he said that they thought they shouldn't have been there to begin with, and they just threw money in the wrong places. And he thought that if they turned the money and the command over to general, that the war would have ended differently. And he said politicians shouldn't try to run wars. To this day, I believe that. And then I asked, are there any other memories from this period that you could share? And he said, at first he did 2 tours there, and by the time he got out, he'd grown a lot, but he always felt like he was 4 years behind because he was in the Navy. So, when he was gone for 4 years, they didn't know anything. So he actually like didn't know about Woodstock. He didn't know about the moon landing until after he got back. So he's like, it was just 4 years of blank, and he got a Dear John letter from a girl he was engaged to while he was on the ship, and he just couldn't do anything about it. He just had to kind of accept it. And so he's like, it's just a void, and you mainly see the same group of people, give or take some people leaving and coming, but he feels really behind even still of just that 4 years. And I asked, what lessons from America do you see in Vietnam War experience? And he said, they're trying to make up by saying thank you for your service everywhere, but it doesn't quite cut it. And he said that just because you're doing service doesn't mean you agree with everything that's being done. And I interviewed like right around when they were putting National Guard in DC. And he said that National Guard being deployed in DC, not all of them are agreeing with it. A majority don't, but you're just following orders. They have an oath, and that's what they're doing because an oath doesn't expire. And you see it even now, like with them in DC.
That's a really good point. Yeah, you don't have a choice. I like what you said about the void. I talked to, nobody knows less than soldiers and sailors because they're not told anything.
Mhm.
You know, what did you learn that surprised you the most?
I think that they couldn't wear uniforms, like transferring stations, and then also the void. Like I didn't know about that.
Did you know he was wounded?
I knew he was wounded, but I didn't know what happened, so I was really shocked that happened.
Was that enemy shell hit him? They must have fired.
No, they were doing it was like one of the cannons above exploded, so it went down through the deck.
Yeah, that's makes.
Mhm.
That must have been on the destroyer, the whole.
Mhm.
Wow. All right, good job. Thank you. Nice. All right, who would? Second. I gotta do something. All right, so Elizabeth, I'll find your PowerPoint. So you want to go for it next? And then it's up. Sound? There we go.
Okay, I'm sick, so bear with me. Hi, my name is Beth. I interviewed my great uncle Mike, and I also had my great aunt Bev in the room, as well as my grandmother Mary. My grandmother Mary is from here. My great uncle Mike was serving the army during this time, but not in Vietnam. He was instead of in the Pacific, in the Atlantic, on the USS Independence. This is his platoon right here. He is the man that is, so you see the nice color there? You go up and to the left, you will see my great uncle right there.
There?
When he was much younger. Okay, I asked one question basically this entire interview because the old people like to talk.
Hey now.
So, my one question I asked was, what were you doing during the Vietnam War? And I got the entire rundown along with opinions. So, Mike served in the military on the USS Independence, which toured around the Atlantic to parts of Europe, Istanbul, Turkey, Barcelona, Spain, Athens, Greece. And he served from 1970 to 1973. He enlisted into the Navy instead of being drafted or otherwise. My grandfather, who is passed away now, he was actually about to be drafted by lottery picking. I believe he was number 40 is what they said, is what my grandmother was saying. And so he would have been drafted, but he did not get drafted. He instead decided to join the US Navy as well at a later date. My grandmother Mary was going to college actually here in Helena. And so I have two perspectives. I have the perspective of someone in the military during this time, and the perspective of my grandma, who was just here in little old Montana. So, first off, let's get grandma out of the way. Grandma, this is pretty rural. She basically only knew what happened on the news. And so anytime she saw the news, that's what she heard about the Vietnam War. She believes it was doomed from the start. It was a political war, not anything for military reasons or anything super important. And there was some talk about the domino theory as well, as one of the main reasons for why the war happened. That was their main reason for why. And what they said, communism's going to take over. And it has been backed up by some evidence, but it is still just a theory. Mike's brother-in-law, my great uncle Mike, was drafted and sent to Vietnam, and he still has many bad experiences from that time period and many things going on. During my great uncle Mike's military service, he at one point ended up in Athens, Greece during a uprising. And so the entirety of his little platoon there, as they had parked the boat, they had gotten off and had gone to one of the bars. And the Greek military would not let them leave for a while because they were there during the uprising. And so they weren't allowed to leave. And when they finally did leave, it was basically just like scare tactics to get out of there. So that's pretty crazy, something I learned. My grandmother also knew people around her from college or otherwise who had just been drafted, we don't know what happened to them. They went to Vietnam. Maybe they didn't. For Mike, the biggest thing is what happened after the war. So he didn't serve directly in Vietnam, but he still felt the effects of what the Vietnam soldiers would go through in terms of like PTSD and all that, but also in terms of the backlash from the public. They said there were two main sides, all the college kids who went to school and did all that, and all the military kids who were there in his town. And he went and he lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So he lived in more military towns than there were. So there was a lot of different protests and whatnot going on around him. Mike's friends, they shied away from him after his involvement in the military, and he's had people berate him in public. And similarly, going off of what you were saying earlier, in airports or whatnot, they had to wear their uniforms to get military discounts and whatnot for a while, until later when it was changed. So he has faced verbal threats and otherwise, even though he wasn't directly involved in Vietnam, just because he was involved in the military. And then after Vietnam veterans and other veterans were widely just ignored, is the big part of what he said. Nothing really happened, and healthcare took a while. Luckily, one of the changes that has happened is that the healthcare and other systems have gotten better at recognizing veterans. He says even now to this day, he's surprised when he gets thanked for his service instead of just being ignored or berated for it. One of his lessons, don't blame the military person and let the military people do their jobs. Because during this entire war, the entire war was basically political and all the political people in power telling the military what to do. One of his stories that he shared, and I'm not sure if this is true or not, but apparently there was a bunker full of Viet Cong down by Saigon right before the Tet Offensive. And what happened is, before the Tet Offensive, these military generals found this bunker, and they said, hey, let's bomb it, let's go do that. But the United States military, the government would not give them permission to bomb the bunker. And he says that most of the Viet Cong came out of that bunker to go and attack Saigon during the Tet Offensive. That's one of his things. Let the military do what the military is going to do. And don't blame the person in the military. They're just doing their jobs. They're just doing what they're doing for their country. And I believe that's all.
Okay, what about your other pictures? You have some more?
Okay. This is the U.S. independence, which he served on.
You know what he did on it?
He worked with the aircraft.
Okay, yeah. Super carrier.
This is the map that he has in there of just generally the area that he's been in.
Just that little Athens.
Yep.
Athens was a nasty military dictatorship. They had a number of rebellions. He was in one of them. Kind of.
Yep.
Then
This is another picture that he has of just Flight Deck in general. He is not anywhere on this picture, I don't believe, that he shared, but he just has one of these pictures.
sure.
This is actually him by one of the planes. Right down here.
Oh, that's cool.
It's a little hard to see, but that's him. Trying to beat the plane, trying to stay cool. And this is also him, standing right by the planes.
Those are attack ones. That's a pretty cool picture. Aaron Dick. Okay, and what was the one thing you thought you didn't know that you learned?
I honestly didn't know he was in the military before this. I just talked to my grandma like, hey, I have this interview and you were alive during that time, right? And she's like, oh my gosh, we need to get your uncle Mike because he was in the military. And I'm like,
That's perfect. All right, nice job. Look at that. Leave. Thank you. Good job. Ready? I'll leave the cured SARS. That was a Revolutionary War battle. Give me 1 sec. Okay, go.
I interviewed my grandma Clark. She's was very tough about it. She had cancer 3 times and is still alive today. And I never heard her talk quite as shakily as she did during this interview. My grandmother volunteered to join the military to help pay for school. She served as a clinical nurse. And she had firsthand experience, and she saw the police fire at multiple protesters, one of them being her mother. Her mother still has a scar on her right shoulder where the bullet was. And she had a lot of friends who flew to Canada to avoid this draft. They never called it a war in the media. They often just called it a police action, which she thought was really interesting. She, unlike most, at first did enjoy her time in the military. She said she got to travel a lot, and it's where she met her husband. She said it really shaped her as a person. But she also believed that it changed her partially for the worst. She believed that the escalation in Vietnam was incredibly unnecessary and foolish, causing her to lose many people she cared for. She believed that there's almost no good reason for war. The deaths of thousands is almost never justified. To McNamara's quote, realize at times you must engage evil, but minimize it to do good. My grandmother said that evil minimized or maximized is still in its nature evil. And in the case of McNamara, in my grandmother's perspective, the evil of war never leads to good. born and death cannot be minimized, and those no good could come out of the Vietnam War. My grandma Clark said the main reason for the war was her ego, and the greatest lesson that we can learn from it is mass death and war are never necessary. And it is a lesson shown time and time again to us, but we never learned. And in Vietnam or Israel and any of the other wars that have currently happened, they haven't taught us that lesson, and perhaps we will never learn. Sad truth, my grandma said, as long as there are wars, as long as there are people, there will always be wars.
A little scary, but yeah.
Yeah,
What was the thing you didn't know that you learned?
a lot. I mean, I didn't even know that she served for one. I didn't know that's how she met her husband. I didn't know about like her mom. I knew that she like had a lot of scars on her body, but I didn't know one of them was because of a bullet wound during a protest.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so she served all around the world, but she was never actually in Vietnam.
Correct. She was a
Isn't
clinical nurse, but her husband did serve in Vietnam.
Oh, really? Okay.
I couldn't really interview him. They're divorced, so. But she told me some of his perspective, and she knew how scary it was to have someone that she loved be fighting in that war.
That was interesting. She said at that time. Last thing, do you know what years?
I don't. I asked her a bunch of times, and she said that she couldn't remember for the life of her. And when you get to her age, quote, all the years blend together.
That's actually very true. I'm warning everybody. All right, any questions? All right, good job.
She wasn't. That was my mistake. I thought she was like 5. She's 5. I thought she was.
Very good.
Lived in Berlin, like most of my life.
And you get the Revolutionary War map if you want to refer to. Okay,
So I interviewed my dad. Yes, my parents are very old, but that's besides the point. My dad lived in Salt Lake City during the war, and he was in grade school, so he doesn't remember a lot, but he does remember some. He said, when I asked him about the United States involvement in the war, he said it was a Cold War. Everyone was terrified of communism. When we had the Cuban Missile Crisis, everybody believed communism would take over the entire world. I was young and didn't know much, but I knew I needed to be scared of communism. So, my dad kind of knows that about the war. I don't know if he knew that necessarily at the time. I know he knows that now. So, I'd like to preface this next question by saying my dad is pretty conservative. And when I asked him about how his family felt about the war, he said, and I quote, "My family was very patriotic and loyal to our government." So when I asked him about the draft, he said, "Don't get me wrong, I was not a huge fan of the draft, but I thought it was necessary. If we were really going to war, we needed soldiers, and most people are not just going to volunteer their life away. I figured that had the war gone on, I would have ended up being drafted." My dad said he would not enlist in the military, but if he was drafted, he would go, and he wasn't going to be necessarily too upset about that. My dad was not a big fan, is not a big fan of LBJ and McNamara. Like I said, he didn't know much about the war at the time, and he kind of just went with what his parents told him. But when I asked him about it, he's not a fan. Today, I asked about what he thought about the war efforts, and he said, "If you're going to war, you need to commit," and we didn't. "I don't think we tried hard enough. Had we used more force, the war could have ended more quickly, and it would not have been painless, but it would have been less painful. I think we drug our feet." My dad, when I asked him other memories from this time period, he talked a lot about his uncle, which I learned he's named after his uncle. His middle name, Lynn, that was his uncle's name. He said, "I remember my uncle, a corporal, coming home. He was a different person. There are things you see over there you never forget that change you. When he came back, he was missing a big chunk of his heel that had got blown off by a landmine. He said he was a hero to my family." He also talked about the news. He said, "I remember the news. There was about one station, and if you didn't believe it, you didn't get news. It was very violent. The things they showed on there were things that would get your show canceled today." And he was also talking about that when he talked about the picture of the protester on fire.
Oh,
He said he remembers seeing that. He thought it was crazy. that someone would do that to himself. So he said stuff like that made his family kind of scared of the anti-war movement. And he thought, like, if they can do this to themselves, what do you think they might do to other people? He also, what did he say? Yeah. He said that he remembers people berating and ignoring soldiers, which again kind of made his family more towards being pro-war because they saw the anti-war people and they're like, we don't want to be a part of that. We don't agree with that. I asked my dad what lessons for Americans today do you see in the Vietnam War experience? And he said, war can be very political. It's important to listen and respect others' opinions and see things from their point of view. Being divided does not help us, it ruins us. I believe the Vietnam War era was the beginning of the one we live in today. We still have so much to learn, but if we can take only one thing away from Vietnam, let it be that we need to be united and get along without killing each other.
Pretty nice. I think he's right about a lot of our world today was great. So what was the thing that he said that surprised you?
My dad's not a very, he doesn't talk about himself a lot. It's like you hear people, they go on dates and they're like, the person talked only about themselves or they didn't talk about themselves at all. My dad is the person that doesn't talk about himself at all. So I didn't really realize that he knew anything about the Vietnam War.
Yeah,
Obviously,
I get it.
I knew he was alive then, but he doesn't talk about stuff like that. So I didn't realize that he knew so much about it.
Something you knew a lot. That's interesting. How old is he?
I don't know how old he is, but he is retired. So if that gives you anything.
Okay, got an idea. Yeah. All right, good job. All right. Well done, everybody.
I don't know my name is on the second page.
Here, I'll just give you my right here. Say it real quick. Okay. All right.
My name's on the front page.
Oh, it is? You're good. Perfect. Got it. All righty then. Nice job. I do like, it always kind of amuses me when people say we didn't do enough. We dropped more bombs by 1968 than all World War II, all the explosives combined. I'm like, what did you want? You know, people don't know all the details of it. It could be people are really, really intelligent and know what's, but, you know. And, but without a doubt, individual incidents happen about people being mistreated. It's always interesting how those stories all snowball. But the ignoring ones, I think, are worse. It makes me sick. The other thing is, it was a big issue about, it was unclear about veterans healthcare. And the VA, the Veterans Administration Hospital got expanded dramatically because it was just like World War II, and then everything's fine. And now, so the Korean War and then the Vietnam War really started expanding the VA, and now anybody who enlists in the military has VA. So, not people who were drafted before, unless they're in war, that's a big hole in it. And oh, and then you mentioned being in Korea and about poor people, you know, Korea was so poor, a little nasty little dictatorship that the US supported after the nightmare of the Korean War, and they were just devastated. Just nightmarishly poor. And then there was a people's uprising and they forced themselves a democratic republic in the 1980s, really not that long ago. And now there's still issues in Korea, but now it's an incredibly wealthy country. But that's interesting when you say that, because that's not Korea today, but it's not that long ago. And I do like a few people getting cracks about old people. Good. All right. Now you know. Speaking for old people, I'll say, okay, so. Anybody want this? It's a request for advanced makeup work. Get this in by your computer.
Okay.
So. We want to do the quiz on the same day as the test. River's all for it. River has spoken. River understands, kind of Irish real quick. This is what we're gonna do. Let's I don't want to do it on the same day I have a test. So I want every, so clear your desk. The anti-war movement, have that, we'll do the good on Wednesday. Okay, we'll do it on Wednesday. Sound good? Everyone happy? Hey, seriously, good job. Some of you had great interviews. I hope you learned a lot. I think we got everyone, right? That's everybody. Okay, so tomorrow we'll do it again. And it's what? Yeah. You have to make up the person.
Need a full backstory.
I should have earlier, it's like 2 seconds. My grandma lived in Hawaii for a little bit with her aunt Bella, my great aunt, who, like, she described her as like, she was Vietnamese before it was full, and he used to teach refugees from Vietnamese English,
Oh,
like after the war. She taught like a lot of refugee women English, but like after the Vietnam War, was that like her height of her career?
I will tell you my experience with Vietnamese refugees in 75, 76. I'll tell you my experience. Okay. It's a good story. And it's actually really funny. John and Cece still vividly. I can still vividly remember.
Oh, I haven't been doing this.
We can do it though. Do you like the challenge?
I don't think I don't even know how much.
We have big festivals.
It's a rat run today for snow. It's a rat in the night. No, it's out there.
Yeah, there's a night. Well, you never know.
He's acquired by the military plan.
We have to have a night. It's supposed to be a Spartan. Yeah, so we got a Spartan. Yeah. I have no idea what's gone.
I guess I'll have to make a bigger one.
Oh, no, there's a whole wall over there. You can do that whole wall. It could be. Honestly, I don't know. To be honest, when you said that, I thought it was still there. It was just, it's kind of ubiquitous.
Yes.
And I have the. I have two Bibles. Don't have space for your choice. And then we have.
I would never.
You know.
I would never.
You know. I'm an exam.